listening to Footscray Live.
So I think I got my political motivations from my mum. You know, it's a common way that people get their politics from their parents, but mum's a social worker. She was a unionist. And so she sort of taught me a lot about injustice in society and things that we needed to right. So that's why I got into politics. I was, dissatisfied with the status quo, wanted to change things, and I can thank my mum for that.
Tim, this is Isaac. Do you see yourself as a lifelong politician, or is it a stepping stone to something else for later on in life?
I'm certainly not thinking about life after politics just yet. Look, I got into politics to serve. I want to make a contribution. I want to shape the country that we live in. So for me, that is the end point. That's the objective. I want to be in politics for long enough that I can have an impact. Unfortunately, I was elected in 2013, and the whole time since then, my party, the Labor Party, has been in opposition. Yeah. So I'm feeling a bit frustrated about not being able to make big changes as part of a government. So that's the thing that's really motivating me at the moment. I want us to win an election so that we can have a government that actually makes changes in our society.
What are you planning of the upcoming changes in Footscray?
Upcoming changes in Footscray. So Footscray is going through quite a bit of change at the moment. If we just think back, just take the last 10 years and look at how Footscray is changing. All these apartment complexes that are going up and just a stone's throw away from here at the Ropeworks site, and down near where I live, down behind Franco Cozzo's, we've got 5 20-storey towers going up at the moment. So there's a lot of people moving into Footscray. The population growth is really rapid, and there's 2 things that I'm really concerned about as part of that population growth. So I want to make sure that we're building the infrastructure and the services that we need to support that. So one thing I've talked a lot about is cycling infrastructure, active transport infrastructure, because if we're having thousands of people moving into Footscray, we can't have people moving around solely by cars. It'll just get congested. It'll be nuts. So we need more people on public transport, and we're building Melbourne Metro, and that's great. That'll mean a lot more trains that are able to get through from the Sunbury line from Footscray through to the city. But I want to build safe cycling infrastructure as well so that people can get around without bikes. The second thing I'm interested in Footscray is making sure that while people are moving in here, we don't change the character of our suburbs, so that people who have been living here their whole life, the people who have shaped what it means to be Footscray, that the things that we love about Footscray aren't pushed out by that change, so that we're able to ensure that those people are able to remain here and stay a part of our community.
Okay.
Hi Tim, it's Marley. With the speech you gave recently about the boy who cried wolf, how did you come up with such a hilarious idea?
So I suppose a bit of context for that speech. We have a politician who's got himself in a bit of trouble with a series of, how do we say it, not particularly factually accurate stories that he's been telling probably about over the last 12 months. And he was elected into Parliament the same year as me. And he gave his first speech at around the same time as I gave my first speech. And for politicians, this is a really big deal. Your first speech in Parliament is when you kind of outline what you really believe, what you want to achieve in your political career. And I can remember that this guy, who was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, he was a McKinsey director, he was a multi-millionaire many times over, and he was sort of considered to be a future Prime Minister. I thought, what does this man want to say? How does he want to change our country? And he talked about the war on Christmas. And he talked about when he was at Oxford, someone didn't want to have a Christmas tree up. I just thought, this is just a pathetic thing to talk about in your first speech. But interestingly, in that first speech, he claimed that Naomi Wolf, a very famous feminist author, was there at the time, and he kind of inferred that she was involved in this Christmas plot. But living in the interconnected world that we do now, Naomi Wolf, the feminist author, jumped in on Twitter and said, wasn't me. I wasn't even at Oxford in that year. I was living in New York as a best-selling author. Lies. This is exactly right. And I thought, there's a bit of a metaphor here between the lying minister and the boy who cried wolf. Claimed there was a wolf that wasn't there. So sometimes in Parliament, a bit of pantomime, a bit of theatrics, it helps to get a message across, to tell a story in a way that people remember. Because if I just got up and said that Angus Taylor lied about being at Oxford with Naomi Wolf, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, and the story probably wouldn't have gotten out of the Parliament that way.
Grania here. I was just wondering, going back to talking about how your mum got you into politics. Was she the reason that you decided to join the Labor Party?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mum gave me a few things that I really treasure in my life. She gave me my feminism, so she taught me that from a really young age, and I was able to sort of carry that through my whole life. And she also gave me the politics of solidarity. So the idea that you can achieve more as a team in politics. She did that principally through workplaces. So she was a social worker and she was a trade union representative, so a volunteer in the trade union movement. And she showed me how people in a workplace are able to achieve more by working together and talking to their employers, talking to bosses, than just as an individual was who, say, would complain to their boss about something. And so that's certainly the philosophy that I take into politics more broadly. You know, there's a old saying that if you want to move quickly, go on your own. If you want to go a long way, go as a team, because you can achieve more in a group. So yeah, I thank my mum for that.
Archie here. What are you going to do to help the homeless problem?
Yeah, so the homeless problem is a really big one in Melbourne and in Footscray in particular.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of causes driving this. We've got a forum of Labor members of Parliament that are working with homeless services providers in the West specifically. So it's a Western region forum, and I want to give a shout out to Katie Hall, who is our state member in Footscray, who might be coming in to be interviewed as well tomorrow. Right, so she's been really leading that charge. Yeah. I want to recognise Katie's work on this. And this forum, we're hearing that homelessness it's a complex issue. There are a lot of things that play a part in it. So, you know, particularly mental health is getting a lot of attention at the moment. There's a state government Royal Commission and a Productivity Commission. Canberra's looked at it, and drug abuse as well. But really driving this, I think, is the structure of our housing market. We need to find ways to build more social housing, more public housing, more affordable housing, 3 different categories, and we need to enable that to be built in communities that are close to the services that people need. So you might have seen just up Ballarat Road, there are a number of
tiny houses.
Yes, well, smaller houses specifically designed to help people facing homelessness and to help them transition to the services they need. If you go down to Footscray, just behind the Coles there, there's another very big facility there that helps people transiting in facing other challenges related to homelessness. That is a very big project that's been built with government support as well. So I think we really need to change the structure of our housing market, make housing more affordable, particularly for people who aren't trying to buy homes, but are trying to find just a place to live.
Yeah. So, Tim, if any of our listeners wanted to help contribute to the homeless issue that you guys are currently fighting, how would you recommend they helped out? Is there anything in particular? Is there a volunteer service? How would they get in contact with you to do so?
So it's a really great question about thinking about what we ourselves can do in these issues. The big structural issue about the way our housing market operates isn't probably something that individuals can help with, but the conditions and the life experiences of people who are experiencing homelessness is absolutely something that everyone in our community can make a contribution to. Across the West, I don't want to name one because the others will be upset if I single out one, but there are multiple services that you can volunteer at. If you just look up on the internet, homelessness in Footscray, that you can, and I've done this, and Bill Shorten, the other member of Parliament in this area, has done this as well.
Wow.
There are a whole range of particularly sort of, food delivery services and outreach services for homeless people in Melbourne's West. And of course, we're really lucky in Melbourne's West to be home to the kind of the wholesale distributor there, the biggest distributor of food assistance in Australia, and that's Food Bank down in Yarraville. So my office, we go down and volunteer there as an office in the food bank, packing boxes for Christmas hampers that go out to people who need that food assistance, particularly around Christmas. And in fact, last year I was there with Bill Shorten and his wife Chloe Shorten, and we were packing these hampers with the entire national media circus following after us, which was a different experience to the usual one, but pretty worthwhile.
Yeah. That's good.
So, Tim, you've said yourself you've been in politics since 2013. What sort of things have you changed in Parliament since then?
Yeah, well, so as we were saying, that my big frustration is that we haven't had the opportunity to change the country through government because we've been in opposition through that time. There are some things that I can say that definitely we've been able to achieve thanks to my sort of time in politics. In the last term of Parliament, I introduced a private members bill, and that's a piece of legislation that doesn't come from the government. It comes from an individual member of Parliament saying, "I reckon this is something that we should do." And that private members bill dealt with the non-consensual sharing of private sexual material. So it's sort of colloquially known as revenge porn. So that's, if someone takes an intimate photo of someone else and it's shared without their consent. I'd noticed that in the United States, United Kingdom, many other areas, this is a criminal offence taken very seriously. And in Australia, there was a gap in the law in the way that this was treated. Some states had some provisions for this, but many states didn't have anything at all.
The blurry line.
Yeah, and I thought this was an area where we need to send a particularly clear message that it's not the fault of someone who took these photos if they were shared publicly, but the person who without consent shared those photos needed to be held accountable to that, and people knew that this was such a bad thing that it was against the law. So I introduced a private members bill on that. I expected that the government would think, hey, this is a pretty good idea and act on it straight away, but they didn't quite do that. They spent sort of 2 years umming and ahhing about it and then introduced their own kind of laws around this. So I can feel some satisfaction that we sort of forced them to take action on this.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that sort of comes down to victim blaming and all that sort of stuff. And I've noticed that sort of stuff is particularly noticeable among teenagers and within schools. Have you considered how they might be able to make some change in educating people at a young age so they don't go on to do these things later on in life?
Yeah, I mean that's a very big part of the prevention space in family violence and in sexual violence, and it's a conversation that's changed a lot, frankly, since I was elected. So when I was elected in 2013, there wasn't a lot of discussion about this, particularly in the Commonwealth Parliament. The Gillard government had done, I think, very good policy work on this issue, but there wasn't a lot of discussion about it publicly. It wasn't something that was sort of part of the day-to-day political debate. That's really changing now, and we've got sort of advocacy agencies like Our Watch, who are based out of Victoria, but a national organisation, who are trying to do that, changing people's attitudes on these issues. Since then, we've also had respectful relationships, sort of coursing curricula coming to schools. I don't know whether you guys...
we've in the Year 10 program in particular, we've noticed a big change in how that's become a larger topic for everybody to learn.
Because I can tell you, it was not a topic at all when I was going to school. It wasn't something that we discussed. And I think a lot of the credit for that goes to Rosie Batty. It was a terrible thing that happened to Rosie's son and to Rosie, but she was able to turn that terrible thing into a very powerful message of advocacy on this issue, and she's been a real champion of courses like that, of helping change attitudes at a younger age.
Would you ever go on a TV show?
Well, I've been on lots of TV shows, current affairs type shows, things like that. Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking more like reality television?
Yeah, like I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
Well, you believe it or not, a mate of mine from politics, Sam Dastyari, was on I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here. I think from that experience, I'll sort of rule that one out. I don't think that worked pretty well for him or for anyone involved, so I don't think I'll be doing that. I love The Amazing Race, though. Like, I'm a traveller. I could totally do that. I'm not sure whether my marriage would survive it, though, so I might need to sort of, maybe I'll do it with my brother or something like that.
What about The Masked Singer?
Masked Singer. Well, how do you know I haven't done it? Like, maybe I'm the next season. Just haven't been unmasked yet.
And you're just hinting it now.
Oh, just, Hey, like in the West, we are, a lot of those shows are filmed here in the West, actually.
Wow.
So Ninja Warrior down in Spotswood and Lego Masters just behind us at the showgrounds.
really?
Wow.
Filming as
Master
we speak.
Chef.
I have inspected the Lego Masters set. I snuck in there. Hamish let me in just to have a little peek, and I don't know, I'm a bit of a Lego nerd, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what advice, Tim, would you give to someone who does want to follow in your footsteps?
Look, if for getting involved in politics, the thing that matters the most is really understanding what drives you, what your values are, and what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So I sort of say to people who are thinking about getting involved in politics, do it. We need it desperately.
Yeah.
But before you do it, think really hard about what it is that's most important to you and what your values are. Because once you get into the political system, it's a pretty brutal process. Just your calendar is just absolutely chockers, and you're traveling constantly, and every 5 seconds you're doing a media interview or a speech, or you're meeting with someone, and it's very easy to sort of fall into a reactive space where you're just reacting to the sort of onslaught of things coming at you. So I think if you want to really achieve change, you've got to have a really strong view of what it is that you want to do in society, how you want to change it. So when I was first elected as a sort of a discipline for that, myself and another member of Parliament wrote a book together about 20-year policy challenges facing Australia, so that we could sort of sit down and think hard about what are the things that are going on now that are going to matter in 20 years' time, and how can we focus on our efforts and our time and our attention on those big picture things, the things that really matter over 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's a really good value to have, because, not naming any names, but there's always going to be some people who, even if they're not, but they're going to be viewed in the public sense, that they're just in politics for the sense of power. So the idea that you guys are looking for that moral value is really good. And sometimes these behaviours can put young people off. For example, we had the climate change strike where lots of students, especially from our school, were leaving to go to the city and protest. How are we planning on educating these young teenagers, and why should they care about the politics of all of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose I don't really approach it from how do we educate young people. It's more how can we let young people educate our politicians, right? I mean, I genuinely think one of the really exciting things happening in politics now and over probably the last 5 or 10 years has been the leadership role that young people are playing on really significant issues. In the US, they have a national movement about gun violence that is led literally by high school students.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. And again, it's not something that was happening when I was a younger person. The climate strikes, obviously the most significant example of this, and the climate activism more broadly. It's difficult to argue with young people on this issue because of the moral weight that young people's voices have. I mean, you're the guys who are going to be living in this changed climate that we're in at the moment. And, I'm scared about that as a 37-year-old. I think about the way that the climate has changed in my lifetime, and I extrapolate that out to my kids. And, it's scary because we're not on track at the moment.
Yeah.
We're on track for 3 to 5 degrees of warming by 2100.
Yeah.
And that is a really scary world. Australia's not on track to meet its targets as part of an international effort to respond to climate change. And we really do need an international social movement that demands action on this issue. And there are no better leaders for that than young people, I think.
Well, what are you going to do to stay on track, though?
Well, we aren't on track. That's the point.
But what are you going to make?
Yeah, so what I'd say to you is that the most important, and I need to get political here, unfortunately, like the most important thing we can do in Australia for Australia to reach its targets on climate is to change the government. Since I was elected, depressingly, I've been in Parliament for 6 years, and in 5 of those years, Australia's carbon emissions haven't been reducing, they've been going up. Now, under the previous Labor government, led by a great person from Melbourne's West, Julia Gillard, we put in place a mechanism for reducing carbon emissions in Australia, and it worked. It was driving down carbon emissions during the course of that Labor government. Now, that mechanism, we can't bring that back for a whole range of reasons, but we need a different mechanism in place that works in driving emissions down. And unfortunately, you can believe Malcolm Turnbull on this, and that the Liberal Party is just not capable of doing it. So until they sort themselves out on climate, we need a new government, and we need to elect a Labor government with a plan for dealing with this.
Thanks so much, Tim. Would you mind lastly launching Footscray Live for us?
It is my great honour to launch Footscray Live. So it gives me great pleasure to launch Australia's newest community radio station, run and managed by the next-gen radio stars from Footscray City College. I declare Footscray Live open.
Thank you so much, Tim. All
Thanks,
right.
Tim.
That was Tim Watts with Isaac, Grania, Archie, Marley, and
Thank you,
myself,
Tim.
James. Thanks for joining us on
Pleasure,
Footscray
guys.
Live.
Thank you.
You're listening to Footscray Live.